Disclaimer. This content is created based on my unprofessional opinion and analysis of related topics for social communication purposes, to expand our mutual views by discussing and analyzing the matters. The source of information and evidence for this content is social media, which contains facts, rumors, and some other fragments without proof for their authenticity or accuracy. So, please pay special attention. There is no claim on the reliability and confirmation of the conclusions presented here.
Hi everyone! I hope you've had wonderful days behind you and even better days ahead. In this video, I want to discuss the Delphi case for the first time. So, what I'm sharing here is purely my personal perspective on this issue, without any claim to its accuracy or correctness. This is simply my analysis and interpretation of this matter based on the limited information available on the internet regarding it. To make the topic clearer, it's necessary to start with an outline, giving a general overview before diving into the details. In this case, the defense attorneys argue that a specific process is involved, which is crucial to proving their client's innocence, yet the judge has denied its introduction and examination in this court. On the other hand, the state insists that, despite the limited evidence and lack of logical connection between pieces of evidence in the case, the accused is indeed the guilty party. I don't want to accuse anyone without reason or make baseless allegations. That is not my intention at all. However, the series of actions and reactions between those parties involved in this case makes it hard for me not to form certain suspicions. If it hadn't been for the defense attorney's persistence and Judge Gull's refusal to allow their requests, perhaps these thoughts wouldn't have crossed my mind. But Judge Gull's reluctance to even grant the defense attorneys this opportunity raises doubts in my mind, leading me to suspect that there might be individuals in that area or town who, in agreement and with a shared purpose, are working to cover up something ritualistic in nature by placing the blame on Richard Allen. I'm not saying he is innocent or guilty, but these interactions between the two parties make me question everyone involved. This means to me the case has already been limited to be approached because the judge disapproved of letting the defense address the case as they think they should. On the other hand, tries to regard the suspect as the murderer, not based on logical evidence and reasoning, mostly on the testimony of a couple of individuals whose credibility is yet to be proved. Especially based on the testimony of Richard Allen's psychologist, whose testimony seems to be the state's ace. However, I don't think she could be a proper option as the witness. Honestly, if I were to investigate anyone, I would start with his psychologist first. I believe that, just as well as psychologists can help individuals overcome mental challenges and improve their well-being through techniques like hypnosis or talk therapy, there is also the possibility this kind of interaction to be used oppositely, which means to implant certain thoughts or illusions subtly in the minds of their clients through a series of carefully, strategically framed conversations. In this way, someone like Richard Allen, whose mental state may already be fragile, could be led into a mental space where he begins to believe he committed this act as a way of finding relief from the heaviness of feeling alien to himself. I don't want to accuse anyone unjustly, but only to reflect my mind challenges on what I'm seeing. This doubt I feel isn't against social norms, law, or humanity. Rather, it's a natural reaction anyone has when faced with so many unanswered questions. Therefore, the first persons I would look into would be the ones who claim to have found some information about a person on private occasions that there is no witness to confirm, other than themselves, like Richard Allen's psychologist. I think when it comes to a piece of noticeable evidence, whether for or against someone, and its knowledge is exclusive to one person, therefore, the credibility of that individual must be confirmed first. Especially in a case, like this, that Richard Allen's confession has been limited to a quite brief outline of the incident. However, if his confession was due to some emotional remorse for what he had done, or suffering from a crisis of conscience, wouldn't he mention anything regarding the emotional atmosphere he had experienced when he was killing them? At least like Chris Watt, that told how the last words of her older daughter don't let him go. As I noticed, Richard Allen's confession has been limited only to the very general and outlined information, to the extent enough to explain and justify the victim's nudity, and taking the responsibility for the murder, and not to the extent to convince the listener that the murder was done by him for real. If I could have questions for his psychologist, I would ask her what Richard Allen had told her about some details of interacting with the girls and their reactions to him, and about more details, because I believe if Richard Allen had confessed to her about the murder for real, then how did she handle it? Because as a psychologist, she couldn't have approached it as if he was speaking in his sleep, but she had to start working on the emotional aftermath of the murder for him. Therefore, she should have been asked how she had reacted to his confession then. Since we are not obliged to adhere to the judge's rules, let's examine the case according to the contradictions, evidence, and possibilities. It has been said that Richard Allen had called his wife to confess to her about killing the girls. So, in such a situation, when Richard Allen returned home, allegedly, after killing the girls, and his clothes were muddy and bloody, is it possible that his wife, based on his appearance and his demeanor, had no idea he might have done something like this? If we assume she did know, but chose to keep it secret, then why did he need to call her and make the confession on what she had already known? Regarding Libby's phone, it was reported that it went off at a certain time point, yet it has been said that Libby's phone pinged at around 4:30 a.m. on the morning her and Abby's bodies were found.
That I thought was bombshell. And that is that Libby's phone all of a sudden at 4:33 a.m. pops back on, and a flood of 15 messages that people had been sending much earlier come onto the phone. And this is the phone that's found under her shoe or in a shoe underneath her body. And to me, it's a game changer. I mean, somehow that phone went on. If I'm the defense, I am spending every dime I have to get the best forensic phone people on the planet in there to testify that there's only one way that happened, that somebody turned the phone back on at 4:33 a.m. It blows apart the state's timeline, because their timeline definitively is that the girls were killed between 2:30 and 3:30, period. That's it. That they've painted themselves in that corner. And if you've got a situation where this phone is turning on inexplicably after no data coming in or out after like 5:47 p.m., there's nothing. It's radio silent. And then all of a sudden at 4:33, where theoretically nobody's moving, right? I mean, you're talking two deceased girls, and all of a sudden this phone just pops on and all these messages. Like, that's indisputable. That happened.
It is, but can that be proven that the phone was turned off and turned on? I would imagine the log on the phone itself would show, powered off or whatever, however it powered off. If somebody turned it off, if it just ran out of battery, and then all of a sudden it comes back on at 4 something, is that it powering on and off? Or is it, I can say I've had this happen with my phone, especially in this office, where the cell signal, sometimes it looks great, and then sometimes it's like not there. I can look like I'm going off the grid too for however long it decides to want to not actually be active. And all of a sudden, the signal seems to pick up, and then boom, a flood of texts come in. That does happen. And it's in the woods, it's under her body. I guess my question would be, how strong is the signal there from their provider? Is that even a reasonable explanation? I mean, it's something to look at. I would think if you're going to go down all the angles.
That's going to certainly be the state's position. And I think that is their position. That the thing just like was not able to ping for whatever reason. But remember, AT&T was pinging every 15 minutes. The odds of 11 hours going by,
true,
and not one of those pings going through, to me indicates that somebody had turned the phone on and then turned it back on.
I would imagine
that's not.
I'd imagine there's a log on the phone that would be able to say how the phone went off if it lost signal, and that would show, I think, the answer to those questions. I don't think that's a question that's impossible for us to get the answer to.
Exactly, and that's why I'm saying, man, forget spending money on experts trying to prove something that you're never going to be able to prove, which is that these 5 dudes are the guys who did it, because the defense doesn't have to prove that. To get to the reasonable doubt that you need to get to in this case, the most powerful evidence is the fact that phone popped back on at 4:30 or 4:30 in the morning, man. It just is, because it blows apart their timeline. If you can destroy their timeline, Richard Allen certainly wasn't driving back there at 4:33 in the morning with two dead girls and staging them by himself.
Yeah.
Like it just it seems implausible. Like I don't know what time he wakes up, but I'm assuming that he'd be alibied for that time.
Yeah.
So and like I'm certain that his wife is going to be able to say, well, he can't, he was home. He was home all night with me, and maybe somebody else. I don't know what he did that evening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like all those questions, but I'm assuming that they'd be able to establish that it wasn't Allen, because he's at the bridge until the time that they say he's at the bridge, and then he's gone. But if the girls are killed sometime that night, because the two things that also come out is there is no time of death that was established, and they didn't take a temperature reading of the bodies. Like those are huge gaping holes for the state in terms of trying to prove these girls were killed.
To me also, the Libby's phone is crucial evidence. And regarding it being off and on according to the timeline, I think the killer or the killers might have taken out its SIM card at the very first moment they got the girls. And then, after bringing back the bodies to the location where they were found, they put back the SIM card and reinserted it into the phone, which caused all the messages to be received after 4:30 a.m., almost all at once. Isn't it possible that the reason Libby's phone was left at the crime scene was intentionally done by the killer to provide false evidence with the fake video of the bridge guy? I believe that the presence of Libby's phone at the scene and the fakeness of the video could be connected. Now about the composited sketch based on witness descriptions. Please take a close look at these two images. One is the sketch based on eyewitness accounts, and the other one is a photo of Brad Weber, who owns the white van. Please note the nasal bridge and the nasal tip in each photo. Now compare it to Richard Allen's nasal bridge and his nasal tip. Richard Allen's nasal bridge is straight and the same width from top to the bottom, whereas this person has a bulbous, it has a broad bony bridge at the top, with a larger fleshy and rounded tip. This distinctive feature wouldn't likely be included in the drawing unless witnesses had observed it specifically. So, it couldn't be the sketch of Richard Allen's face. Also, please look at the hair above the ears of the sketched portrait, and this guy and Richard Allen. I even brought Richard Allen's photo before he was imprisoned, to show it is likely he hasn't had this kind of hairstyle. So, again, it shows to me the sketch couldn't depict Richard Allen's face. In my view, the person who had been sketched must have had such appearance features. Additionally, in another sketch in which the person appears younger, that wouldn't necessarily contradict the other sketch, nor does it suggest that the witnesses got it wrong. To me, it's quite possible that multiple suspects were involved in the case, and each was seen by different witnesses. Another point on the bridge guy's photo, regardless it is fake or real, this image shows that if we view Richard Allen's face from the same angle compared to the man in the video, the width of the face, the length from the edge of the hat to the chin, and especially the prominence of the nose, are completely different from Richard Allen's features. This suggests to me that Richard Allen cannot be that person. I also recall that 2 years ago I heard something about the girls not being killed during the day, and it was done later. During this period, the girls could have been kept in a van around there. Isn't it wild? I think that the white van that had been possibly infused or injected into Richard Allen's mind may have been the place the girls were kept in after the girls descended until they were killed, and not the reason for Richard Allen's being disrupted. Assuming the above information is correct, then doesn't it indicate that the murder of the girls might have had a goal other than assault? On the other hand, it's been mentioned that there might have been signs of tears on one of the girls' faces. I think in moments of extreme terror, people often can't cry because the fear is so overwhelming, like in the case of Kaylee and Zana. Crying often only happens when there's a slight chance of hope or a plea for mercy or refusal to accept an enforced decision. All these create such an impression in my mind that possibly the girls were captured by a couple of people involved in the murder. Their phone SIM card was taken out of the device, and then they were transferred into a van. If one of the girls was crying, possibly it could have been in this period. There being no sign of defense by the girls raises some concerns and doubts about the circumstances of their deaths. I think both of them were becoming unconscious from something like chloroform before being killed. Otherwise, how could it be possible that the bloody hands of Libby show her involuntary or instinctively attempt to stop her bleeding, but she wouldn't have automatically defended against her throat being slit? Also, it is possible those two slight scratches near Abby's lips occurred when they tried to hold the chloroform under her nose. The manner of Abby's hands, like the boxer's hands, also could be because of her struggling to not let them put chloroform under her nose, but the person might have grabbed and kept her hands in that manner until she became unconscious. Another point is that if the killer were only one person, then why his way of slitting the girls' throats was different? Doesn't it indicate the killers were more than one person? Therefore, I think the girls' murder could have been more ritualistic, and possibly they might have been unconscious before the ritual. I also believe the girls hadn't been assaulted sexually, as well as Richard Allen was programmed to say, by seeing the van and being disrupted, he didn't assault the girls. To me, in fact, the murderers themselves knew they didn't essay the girls. So, I think Richard Allen's alleged confession story can be regarded as a confirmation the girls weren't assaulted. In this probable ritualistic murder, I think Libby might have been the main target due to the way her throat was slit in a way that needed more focus and concentration. To slit the throat like an Abby is a random and uncontrolled slit, while cutting a throat vertically might have had a reason or meaning and needed more mindfulness to be done. Since my major for my master's degree was research in art history, I have frequently encountered ritualistic sacrificing in my research, in which the target had been chosen according to different criteria like gender, virginity, and for different reasons. Even to me, it could be possible that Libby's clothes being put on by Abby might have a ritual meaning, if not done to mislead or confuse the investigators. Thus, I think this murder could have had a goal other than assault, and it had been done by more than one person, and the place of the murder belonged to Logan, and the place of keeping the girl before the murder was a van belonging to another resident around there. Could they be paid for letting the killers use their properties? I don't know. Of course, sacrificing a human being, as far as I know, goes back to far ancient ages. But regarding this case, I don't have any idea. As I remember, because it was a relatively long time ago that I had been involved in such research, in the ancient ages, many sacrifices could be made for different reasons and according to various criteria. Considering, the focus of the video is not on these kinds of matters, but is related to them. If I want to give my opinion on this case, I should say at first I didn't think this murder could be a kind of ritualistic sacrifice, but as I focused on it, for now, my guess is there is the probability that this murder could have been done for or by someone who might have a girl with some similarities to Libby's features and characteristics, and be suffering from a serious illness, and this sacrifice might have been down for her to gain back her health. It is the first guess that occurred to me after I faced some points I mentioned in this video. I am almost convinced that it could be a ritualistic sacrifice murder. Moreover, I think it is very probable it had been premeditated, and the murderers might have been non-local, but due to the proper environment in Delphi, they might have paid to some local individuals to help them in this regard. This first occurred to me when I heard Ron Logan had wanted one of his relatives, I guess, to make a false alibi for him. I believe he didn't kill the girls, but possibly let the murderers use his private properties for this, as well as a person who might have done the same by letting them keep the girls in his van until midnight after the local searches were stopped, and then they did what they did. Also, if I am guessing true, then I am sure, as I told you before, the girls weren't assaulted sexually, and even they wouldn't have suffered from their throats being slit, because they must have been unconscious by then. But during the period they had been kept in the van, of course they might have been afraid and cried. The way I see it, and from my perspective on this incident, there are a few more points that should subsequently come up. Like 1. The signs of girls' defense weren't seen on the girls. Then, as I mentioned, they must have become sedated by the killers before the murder. Thus, the place of Libby's hand towards her head couldn't be because of her challenge, but also it can be according to a kind of meaning her body was in combination with the branches put on her body, which may show a kind of runes. Moreover, as I noticed in this picture, if it has been drawn precisely, according to what she had observed in the courtroom videos or photos of the victims, apparently based on this drawing, Libby's hair had been gathered above her head, which could be a sign of being dragged to the place by her legs, not by her hand that some believe the way of her arm toward above her head might have been because of being dragged by her arms. Otherwise, her hair must have gathered under her body and not at the top of her head. This is more confirmation to me that Libby's hand position must have been defined this way intentionally and meaningfully. 2. If the girls had been sedated, then Libby's bloody hands couldn't have been because of her automatic reactions to stop the bleeding. It might have been done by others in a meaningful or ritualistic manner. 3. The way of Libby's being slit might have had a meaning or ritualistic aim. 4. If the girls had been sedated, therefore, the bloody sign on the tree couldn't have been created by Libby, and very probably it had been done by the killer, and for a kind of healing ritual, as I mentioned before. Of course, many people don't believe there could have been a ritualistic sacrifice like me at the beginning, but I think we have to believe it soon or late, unfortunately. There are many sources on YouTube that, in case anybody who wants to know more about some rituals and related matters, can take a look at. But I have brought some short fragments in this regard.
The defense has tried and tried. They've been rebuffed about bringing in the theory that Odinists did these murders. You know, Odinists represent Norse, they worship Norse gods like Thor. Okay, I didn't know that was a thing. Apparently it is, according to your book, The Odin Brotherhood. But how could the defense, Dr. Mark Mirabello, spin the fact that these girls were stripped naked, they were murdered by slashing their throats, they were left out in a wooded area and then covered in branches? How does that in any way indicate Odinism? Because the defense has not given up. They're still trying through lines of cross-examination to establish enough facts to bring in Odinism. They're still trying. So how does that equal Odinism, Mark?
I've studied Odinism for over 30 years, and I've never witnessed a sacrifice of animals or humans.
How was it done? Let me tell you that everybody speaks about blood in the runes. You will often hear that from new pagans, and a ritual is required. But the extensive research I have done before, and now the new research, because I might have missed something, no, there is no specific ritual anywhere. No specific ancient Scandinavian ritual, Old Norse ritual, Viking ritual, pre-Christian Scandinavian ritual, whatever you want to call it, that tells you how you give blood to the runes. There's nothing on the sources. Any ritual you can come by about giving blood to the runes, it's New Age stuff. Rest assured of that. I need you to understand that. Nowadays, there are rituals, but they are not historically accurate. They are not taken from any old source. Just today's inventions. That doesn't mean it doesn't work. There is some rune magic with the use of blood and salt, etc. Not going to teach you that in here, but all these performances simply don't come in any old source. We do not know how it was done in pre-Christian Scandinavia. And I repeat, the rituals involving blood and runes that we know of are modern inventions, not taken from any historical source. But this, again, doesn't mean the modern rituals don't work, right? So, with this being said, let's move on to what we know. So let's start from the beginning. In prehistoric times, mainly Paleolithic and Mesolithic still, there were some cultures that believed that the soul was contained within the blood. Ritualistic cannibalism existed, mainly to eat the marrow, because it was believed that the marrow was the essence of the person, of the individual. And so by eating it, one would acquire the essence of the deceased, incorporate the attributes of the deceased. And the same thing goes for animal sacrifices. But the blood contained the spirit. So the drinking of blood in human or animal sacrifices was to incorporate the spirit. Not only that, but until quite late in cultures that retained shamanic practices, the consumption of blood from the sick by the shaman was to find the disease in the blood, know it, and destroy it to cure the person who was sick. Consumption of blood in shamanism is for a variety of purposes, from healing, divination, to gather knowledge. We have Kvasir in Norse mythology for this one, which I will talk about further ahead. It was also for incorporation of spirit, to curse, and so on and so forth. For obvious reasons, blood was seen as a source of life, the fluid that gave life to matter, gave life to the body. Blood was life.
In how to worship, how to speak with Odin, we need to answer to a question first. Who is Odin? Odin is a very intense, intimidating, complex and intelligent god. He is for sure singular in personality. For myself, it's actually the darker aspect that had me gravitate. A process. Norse witchcraft cannot be taken to your living room because it is not based on a contemplation of the land, but interaction with it. Through living in the landscape, that very same landscape becomes part of us, just as we are part of it. You see, there is a landscape behind the window, and there is a landscape outside of it.
That was my today video. Thank you for watching, and if you found it helpful, please share it in any way you want.